All right. Well, my computer says my computer actually says 5 p.m. and I'm in New York, so that's a problem. But my computer says it's time to start. Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Herzog, and welcome to All Joking Aside. This is going to be the first in a series of conversations we hope to have about the world of comedy. Over time, we're going to bring you actors, writers, directors, producers, and stand-ups to talk about where comedy is and where it's going. And we got something really special for you tonight. So, you know, if you've heard me talk about Emerson before, you know I give a lot of credit for, you know, my career to and my good fortune to my years at Emerson and what I was able to learn there and the people I was able to meet. But I have to say, you know, meeting our two guests who will be here tonight or are here tonight has probably been the most important moment of my career ever. It certainly changed everything for Comedy Central. It changed everything for me, and I know it changed a lot for them. So Matt Stone is the co-creator and executive producer of South Park, of Book of Mormon, of Team America. Anne Garefino is the executive producer of South Park, Book of Mormon, and Team America. They are Emmy winners, they are Tony winners, they are Grammy winners. They are one Oscar away from being EGOTs. And at least as of 8 p.m. Eastern this evening, I still count them as friends. We'll see how they feel about that when we're all done. But welcome Matt Stone and Anne Garefino to Emerson College.
Wow, what a nice place this Emerson College is. Yeah, what a great place.
Welcome, this is great.
This is cool, yeah.
Yeah, so I want, you know, we're talking to a lot of students tonight, a little bit of alumni. And so we're going to cover some ground, you know, we have certainly covered before, but I'd love you to share with them. So Matt, could you just give us like the quick, or not so, you know, take as much time as you like, actually. Could you give us the quick sort of Matt and Trey origin story?
Oh my gosh, man, I don't even remember that story. You know, well,
if not, we'll make Anne tell it.
Oh, I can make Anne tell it. I mean, I think you know, with the relation to cut to the chase, like Trey and I met in college. It was probably the most productive thing that came out of my college years. I had a sort of a different college experience.
And that was University of Colorado, right?
University of Colorado in Boulder. And Trey and I were both sort of misfits, you know, and I was doing a math degree, and Trey had done he had actually come to Berkeley School of Music for a year and sort of like decided that wasn't for him. He was talented enough to get in, but then he kind of came back to Colorado, ended up at CU, and we ended up in film school, like classic, you know, middle of the country, but classic, like independent film kind of stuff, you know. And I still think that's sort of way we think about ourselves as independent filmmakers. We made a movie. We came to LA via Sundance, and at some point we made a little short for actually for someone, you know, that we all know, Brian Graydon, who was running something else at that point. And he signed us to our first little deal to make a television show. And I guess when we go back, we'll go back and talk about this as part of when I'm sure I won't get too distracted, but like it was a remarkably different business back then than now. Like when
I want to talk about that as we
it's like Beverly, like kind of like Beverly Hillbillies or something. I don't know. You know, you're driving to LA in your car and trying to like find people who work in the film industry just on the street. I don't know. It's so ridiculous. Somehow we end up with this little short, this little viral. It's kind of a viral video that we did called "Spirit of Christmas" that took off, kind of pre-internet, and that ended up in Comedy Central.
But Brian started sending it out as a Christmas card to friends, right, on VHS tape.
Yeah, and then people copy it, and it just had, and we didn't put our names on it, so it had this, I don't know, it had that thing that now happens a zillion million times all over the world every second now, where people share something, right. And it was like short, and it was like it was really shitty in animation, so it could survive the generations. You know, you used to not be, you know, if you copied it, it looked like shit. Copy it, but it would, even 16 generations, it was still kind of funny because it was such, you know, so shitty looking. So I think that helped it. And then we ended up in your office, and we got 6 episodes, and you know, I don't know, we have some funny stories from back then, but it was like it was really about for me and Trey, I'll say from our perspective, you know, we got a show on television, you know, and it was on Comedy Central, which was a little network, but for us, I mean, I can't, that like sort of thing, you can put something on YouTube and it can happen now. That was like a real, getting something on television was just such a just even that was such an achievement. And we thought that was going to be it, basically.
Yeah, it was a really different day. You know, you couldn't self-publish like you could today, right? And you had to go through, quote, gatekeepers, right? You know,
Yes.
that's what I was doing. I was like a gatekeeper. I was like, oh, we'll take you, or we'll take, right? When you guys left school and came out to LA, what did you think you were going to be, or what did you want to be?
It's so weird. I can't really remember. I mean, I was like, me and Trevor were like weird. Like, I wanted to be a drummer. Trey was more fully formed. Like, Trey definitely, like, from a very early, you know, even in film schools, like, obviously had a real touch about directing. Like, he's just like, okay, that's, you know, he's almost like, okay, that's what he's going to do. Me, I was a little bit like, the hell am I doing? What we thought we were going to do was, it was like, this was early 90s sort of indie film. Richard Linklater, Go Fish, remember that, the film, sure. The black and white film, like Spike Lee. So those are the people, even Tarantino with like Pulp Fiction, or not Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs maybe was like 94. We were in that, like, oh, that's what we're gonna be. But we made like this ridiculously campy, cheesy, dorky movie, Cannibal the Musical. But that was the business model: make a movie, sell it at Sundance for $1 million. It was like, you know, it was like a little bit of like, this is so ancient, I'm trying to relate it, but maybe it was a little bit like the way cannabis stocks or NFTs feel a little bit to a certain crowd, you know, like, hey, we can go do that. And then that will be, you know, it was kind of a humble, like, we should be able, it wasn't like we were in it for the money, but you could do that and then make another movie.
Right.
And that was what we were shooting for.
Before we get to Anne, I'm going to get to, we have some questions that were submitted by the audience, but I do want to insert one quickly because I thought you'd appreciate it. A current student, Henry Mandler, said, I'm a big fan of Cannibal the Musical. I think it's a masterpiece, but it seemed like hell to make. There wasn't big scale bells and whistles. It was just a group of people out in Colorado, ? And then he wanted to know, you know, what was it like to try and make that movie?
So in my memoir, it will be, I learned everything I needed to learn about filmmaking on that movie. You know, I really did. And Trey would say the same thing. When we made every mistake, ran into every wall, but it was form a company, learn what that was, get investments, do the little documents. You have a shared general partner, limited partners, you know, make deals with it, get a cheap camera.
So you raised money to make it?
$125,000.
Wow.
And we had another friend, Jason McHugh, who you guys know, who was from California. So he was from California. So like he could raise, like, he got like, you know, a third of the money from his fancy friends from the Bay Area. But we just raised it, dentist by lawyer by, you know, my dad put in 5,000 or something. I don't know. It was like, you know, and then we shot it on weekends and we did a big spring break trip, and it was all college students and people work for free. And
can you see it anywhere today?
Yeah, it's on one of the streaming services. I don't know. Troma, but we ended up selling it to Troma for peanuts, right. Almost literally. And so it's out there. And I don't know. I don't know where it is right now. I should know that. That's shitty. I should really know that.
All right,
Cannibal Music. Moving on, Anne.
Anne, your journey started in the great state of New Jersey.
It did.
And took you to Boston College.
Right down the street.
And you, right down the street. We won't hold it against you. We love Boston.
I should have gone to Emerson.
And what did you study in school, and what was your sort of plan coming out of school?
I was a finance major because I was good in math. And even though I liked all the art stuff and I did that extracurricular activities, but I was like, I'm going to go into business and I'm going to be a stockbroker. And then it came time to look for a job, and I was like, oh God, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And I, you know, turned left, went to Washington, D.C. and got a job at the Folger Shakespeare Theater. And my poor parents were like, you what?
Excuse me?
You're making no money. You have no health insurance. We paid for a finance degree. What's going on? But it all worked out.
But when did you move to LA? When did you move to LA? Sorry, I'm asking questions now.
Yeah, that's good.
Come on, let me ask you.
I moved to LA. I worked in DC for public television for about 7 years. And I worked at the Folger, then I moved to public television. And then I came to LA to go to the American Film Institute. Because I wanted to make scripted, I wanted to do scripted stuff. And when I was working for public television, I was doing concerts and news and documentaries and stuff, which I loved, but I wanted to tell stories.
And so how did you meet Matt and Trey?
Debbie Liebling
Debbie Leland was a colleague of mine at Comedy Central, and it actually is the person who said to me, "You need to see this tape," which was the aforementioned
Spirit of Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've worked at Comedy Central longer than all of you. I've been there longer and more consistently than Doug Herzog. But I was working on a show, and it was called Comics on Delivery, and Debbie was the exec, and her next show was this little animated show called South Park. And I had no interest in animation. I really just wanted to get out of television and go make a romantic comedy. And I wanted to make a movie, a cute little movie. Really yeah, Matt and Trey have really derailed me. And
you're still waiting 30 years for that.
Yeah, and then in the next room in my office was this guy who was a friend of yours, Matt, and his girlfriend was a friend of yours. I think you slept on their floor or something. But he had a 3/4-inch tape of I think it was like part of the first episode, because you did that in Colorado.
Right.
And he was making multiple copies. And I was like, what are you doing? And he was just running copies every day. And I was like, we're almost done. I don't care what you do with the stock, do whatever you want. But and then Debbie said, will you meet these guys? First, I met Brian Graydon. And I said, I don't want to do your show. I don't want to do animation. I'm going to go make a movie. Thank you very much. And he said, just meet them. And I met Matt in a Starbucks. And
which were probably a new thing. We're talking 25, 26 years ago. So Starbucks.
We are.
That was a really hip, cool place 26 years ago. I know you think of Starbucks like McDonald's, but no, this was Starbucks. It was like
they were cool.
And I think the first thing Matt said to me was, "Are you hungry? I'm hungry." And that's pretty much been the history of Matt and I forever.
Are you hungry? I'm hungry.
Matt's always hungry, and we're always, that's the first thing we have to do.
Finding food.
So we sat down at Starbucks, and
that was literally 25, 26 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before I ask you my next question, I just want to to say to students, you've heard now both these stories. Matt, they both sort of came out here with not a completely specific idea what they wanted to do, but with their eye on something. But certainly in Anne's case, it sort of, at least in terms of what she thought she wanted to do, it took a big left turn. And so I just think the note is, to just always, despite who you think you might be or want to be, just keep your ears open and eyes open for these opportunities that come your way that could end up being great and life-changing and career changing, as it I think was for Anne. And just tell me quickly, what were your first impressions when you met Matt and Trey together, and how long did you think it was going to last between the three of you? Well, just curious.
I really wanted to do a movie. I did, and it just goes to show you I have no. I'm not a smart human being when it comes to something.
That's not true.
But I got talked into working for them. I felt sorry for them because they were working out of the Lantana Center, which is in LA. They were sitting on the floor to take meetings. They didn't have an office. Brian was like literally on top of me to just take the job. And I was like, I don't want the job, Brian. I don't want to do animation. You guys are nice. I think that little thing I saw was really funny. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen, but I don't want to do animation. And so I had met Matt, and then I went skiing, and I was like, you guys, good luck. Matt's like, we might have to find somebody else. I was like, yeah, good, go find somebody else. And I went skiing, and Brian called me every day. And then I finally just caved because I was like, I'll just set them up. I'll get them started. I'll introduce them to people at Comedy Central. I'll replace myself and go do my movie. And I never met Trey until after I was hired. Wow. And then we went to look at an office space, and Trey had bought a new white, I don't know if you remember, he had a white weird car. I don't know, he bought some new car, and he was all excited. He's like, do you want to ride with me? And I was like, okay, I should meet this guy.
We really were feral. We really were the Beverly Hillbillies, like Nouveau, we were really.
Yeah. So we rode together to the new office space, which was a former sperm bank.
That's right.
Westwood.
That's true.
It is true. Yeah. And Trey said to me, I said, I really wanted to make a movie, and that's all I had in my head, that I came out here to make a movie. So I said to Trey, what do you want to do? And at the time you had to choose in a way. You had to say, I'm doing TV or I'm doing film.
Right. Yes, you did. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It wasn't, people didn't jump as easily from one to the other. And Trey said, I just want to make things that make people laugh. And I was like, okay. And that's kind of,
He's been true to his word.
he's been true to his word.
He's
So
been true to his word.
I
There
went
you go.
to the office. I started to work. Brian Graydon left to go run MTV, and he dumped the whole thing in my lap. And I was like, wait, I was the one that was supposed to leave. So
And
I'm
you're still there. And you're still there. Quickly before we move on, how many? There's a fair amount of people that have been there from day one, right? Still.
Yeah. And even pre-day one in a way, like Eric Stow and Adrian was a little bit before me. Crispy
Yeah.
was.
Crispy, so there you go.
We have people who've been there, yeah, the whole time for sure.
Time.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about Matt and you know the very unique production style that you have. And I would you'll hear Matt and Ann talk about it, but for anybody who's really interested in how the show is made, and you should be, because it's really fascinating process. There's a great documentary called 6 Days Till Air that I think you can get on the Comedy Central app. Check it.
Yeah, I don't know where it is.
You should watch it. It's fascinating. But anyway, Matt, talk a little bit about you know, how you make the show week to week.
Well, we, you know, partly what happened was the original show was we came from film school, so it was a stop motion animation experiment using a down shooter and a 35 millimeter camera that you had to like focus and you had to click, click, click. I mean, really like the way they did it in the 30s, really, you know, just like classic animation. So when everyone loved the show, they wanted to do it. It was pretty obvious that like you couldn't even begin to figure out how to do that at any kind of scale. And this was just when computer animation was just starting to kind of take off. So we got into computer animation and bought these, you know, we basically figured out how to replicate the look with computer animation so that you could start making shots. Now something that's like, I don't even need to explain to people. I think they get it. You have a shot, you open up the shot, you know, you have assets, you animate the assets, it gets saved off as a file. That was pretty cutting edge, like in mid 90s at like what we were doing. Just not many people were doing exactly that. And, you know, it took us a long time, but I remember we had to buy these, they're called Silicon SGI workstations. And they were like they were as big as a desktop.
Dinosaurs.
And I remember they were like $25,000 a computer, you know, we had to buy like 8 of them. And we were just sitting there going, holy shit, $25,000 for a computer. Like, holy shit, you know, and we had we had to buy these special computers that were like so expensive to just be able to barely do this show. And I swear to you, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I saw a pile of them outside in New York on the sidewalk. I swear to God. They were like $25,000 or $30,000 when I was like, I know exactly what this blue box and whatever thing. There's a pile of them like trash, like they're just worthless now. But that gave us basically, we just got into this actually did happen. I mean, this is like apocryphal story, but something like this did happen where we were so behind and so dodging Doug's call and like, where's the whatever? And Trey and I, we said, fuck it. It's all hands on deck. We're going to animate. I swear to God, this happened. And it's like ridiculous because I'm not good at any visual stuff. So we sit down at the computer all weekend. We're all hauling, got to make this for Doug. And Trey and I sat there and we each did like a shot or two. And both of us kind of in our own way, we really did after that weekend. We came out and we go, okay, you guys do this, you guys do this, you guys do this. Both of it. It was like no one kind of did that. It was just more like we just had enough. We had done it ourselves with construction paper. You know, we knew that abstractly, and then we did it on computer and we came out of that and we started making basically an assembly line. You guys do this, you guys, instead of like, here's a shot, you set it up start to finish, which is the way you would start. We made an assembly line and now that assembly line just gets years and decades. And now we can do an entire show in 6 days. And it's insane how fast it can go, how fast.
But you kind of always were doing them in 6 days, right?
Well, because we're like we ended up just procrastinating and we just get to crunch time. And that crunch on every show became the norm. And then we just kind of like, we said, okay. And kind of it is because Trey is like more than me, a little more of a zone play. Like he wants to be in the zone. He's like a real, like a lot of comedians and they want to get in a groove and it's about a thing. And once he gets in that zone, he doesn't really want to go to bed or like, you know, do anything like, you know, sleep or anything like that. Whereas I'd like to go to sleep. And so, but it's more, I think, you know, he's really in touch. He's really smart about that. He's in touch what makes him really, really click. And he knows that if he gets in that perfect thing where you're excited about something and nervous about it, and holy shit, I can't believe I'm doing this. And we're, you know, like that's right where he wants to be. And he kind of, so it's kind of manufacturing crisis a little
Right.
bit, you know, a little
But
bit.
it's almost produced like a sketch comedy show would be, like on a week. You come in with ideas each week, but there's not a script necessarily written when you show up 6 days in advance, right?
No.
No, you know, no. And then we just go, okay, we have to do it. But that little bit of that's what I'm saying is I think it's a little bit, it's a little bit of like, yeah, we put ourselves in crisis. So we do it. You know what I mean?
So speaking of making it challenging for yourselves, right? So you're doing South Park every week, which is challenging enough. And then you guys went off and made a South Park movie, but
Right.
It wasn't just a movie, it was a musical. So the degree of difficulty goes up. And then you went and made Team America, which just wasn't a movie. It was a movie with
Doug,
marionettes.
you're forgetting about basketball. And thank you very much for forgetting about that. Thank you. Appreciate it. That's a friend. You're a real pal.
Which
Okay.
History's come all the way back around on basketball. And then Book of Mormon, which was not just a musical, but a musical about Mormons. So
Right.
everything has always had like this, you know, you've always done incredibly, you know, sort of taken conventional things and found a way to make them more inventive and more challenging. And talk to me, you know, as a producer, which I think is a hard thing for people to understand what a producer does. I remember when I went to college, I used to say I was going to be a producer. I had no idea what that meant. You've now produced across, you know, movies, TV, Broadway. Tell us a little bit about what a producer does and how that might differ from movies to TV to Broadway, if it does at all.
Yeah, I think a producer does whatever it takes to get it done. And so if you know how to produce whatever someone puts in front of you, you figure it out, you know? And I wish Matt and Trey would do the same thing twice so I could say, oh, look, I know how to do this, but they don't. I didn't know how to do animation. I didn't know how to do a puppet movie. I barely knew how to do Broadway. And we're now doing this deep fake thing and I don't know how to do that either. And we're trying to figure it out. So a producer figures it out, you know, and there are different kinds of producing styles, but I kind of came up from the ground up. I was a production assistant. I have done every job on the way to being a producer. And that's the way I did it. Some people just step into it because they do the financial stuff or they bring the money or they bring a script, you know, there are all kinds of ways to be a producer, but I did it kind of the old fashioned way, I guess. Yeah, it's but I do need to say that Matt and Trey many times in the writer's room when we were doing Book of Mormon said that the relationship between Price and Cunningham was like a romantic comedy. So I did get to do my romantic comedy.
It's true. We did that for you.
They did that for me, yeah, no. But
it's an homage. How did and this is for both of you, how is producing the show, like, you know, during the pandemic with everybody at home across, you know, spread across the country, has that impacted the process? What's that been like?
With South Park?
Yeah.
I mean, I just we had to totally deconstruct it and put it back together again. We cannot do the show remotely in 6 days. So it is a different process. But so when the pandemic hit, we were about to shoot it. We had this kind of movie idea we were about to shoot, and we were going to start principal photography on March 16th. And so we were part of it was an incredible thing to live through. Like, it's such a weird time that week that everything shut down, right? And I live in New York, and Anne and Trey and everyone was in LA, and we were going to start shooting in LA. And so I was scheduled to go out there. And I was in New York, and I was like, oh man, you know, it just felt like the walls were closing in if you were here that week. But people in LA are like, what are you talking about? You know, it was a very it was a very intense kind of experience. And we had to kind of pull the plug on our movie that we were doing, thinking we're going to shut down for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. So then it becomes obvious after all sitting in our house for like 6 or 8 weeks, like, okay, what are we going to do with our lives? Not even this movie. The movie's not going to happen. But, you know, we have a few different things we're working on. We've got things on the back burner, front burner. You know, we can kind of choose what do we want to spend our time on. And, you know, maybe it didn't take 8 weeks. It took a few weeks, but I don't know. One of us just was like, can we try doing South Park could be remote? Because everyone knows so much what they're doing. You know, we've got so many people who've worked there for decades. We know the process. Could everyone do that remote? And we can't do it in 6 days. So let's let go of that. But if we could do something and get an animation pipeline going 100% remote, we could do something. So we really, like had a million Zoom meetings like everybody else, and like busted that into shape, which again, if we hadn't all worked together for decades in a building together, I don't think you could just start up and figure that out. Everyone knew exactly what to do. Everyone come get your computers, go home. And we did two specials, which are hour longs. We've done 2 of them. They've been 100% remote.
And how long did it take?
None of us.
So versus the usual 6 days, those took.
Oh, so the first one, they're double length, but the first one took 12 weeks, essentially.
Wow.
The second one, we should have done quicker, but it ended up taking like 8 or 9 weeks, but we could have done it quicker. And I think we're going to do one for mid-June, and it has a lot of, it kind of has some ambitious art involved that we had to get a little extra start on. But when we get to it, we're going to try to do it in 5 weeks. And we kind of need to do it. We know we can do it in 5 weeks, and so we can do it 6, but we shouldn't do it in 8. It's just like, we can tell that's how long it should take. And any longer, it starts to overbake, and then we get bummed out. And it's like, there's this about right comedy, especially. It's got to be fresh enough. You got to work on it. You got to make it better. You got to iterate, but you don't want to get bored. You don't want to get unexcited with it, and that's for a writer. It's different from producers. Like the producer part of me and totally enjoys like 7 and 8 year projects. I don't know why. I'm like some kind of weird war general or something. I just enjoy this stuff. But as a writer, it is hard to write something and 2 years later be like, let's shoot that joke, that killer joke, because you just have, you've just lived with it. It just seems so. It is that trying to keep the energy going, but not too fast, because we're also old and we're lazy and it's hard to work and we don't like working as much. But it's kind of like we have to hold our feet to the fire. We won't do it.
You guys have always, despite what everybody's always writing and talking about the show and coming up with their own kind of ideas about what makes you guys tick, and are they Republicans, are they Democrats, are they liberal, are they conservatives? I know you guys spend a lot less time on that than the rest of the world does. What the world is, it's a rapidly changing place, especially for comedy, and around what's happening in social media and cancel culture. Does any of that ever come into your thinking as you're creating new episodes and moving forward, or is it you just batten down the hatches and you do what you're going to do and the world will deal with it?
No, I mean, I think that I find the whole thing interesting. So we dive into that subject, but at the end of the day, I think we're held back from, I don't want to talk, there's part of me that wants to talk about that all the time, but it's all part of me that feels like that's just narcissistic. It's like, like we definitely talk about ourselves and that, and do that reflexive comedy. And I love that stuff. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, it just becomes like self-defining. You know what I mean? Right. I mean, it's like, we just have done so many shows and we've taken so many stands, and we've been so like blunt.
You have been there and done that.
Yeah, we've been there and done that, and also been totally, totally wrong, and like that's the worst joke, and that's the dumbest position. And then sometimes look back, oh, that was really cool that we said that back then. I have, and my relationship with those shows and those attitudes are like they're 20 years ago. So I think for us, whenever we think about it, we don't think about the show having to have any kind of coherence like that.
Right.
And I don't. I'll just say for me, I don't. I just go, what's funny now? What do we want to make fun of now? And if it's different than what we wanted to make fun of then, or we change our mind about something, or it clangs with something, like, I don't care. You know what I mean? This is me now. This is me now. That was me then. On that
note, we had a question from a student, Antonio. I'm going to butcher everybody's name, by the way. Antonio Kamasmi. And he wanted to know, over time, do you look back and is there any episode you look back as that you go like, wow, that was prescient, like we got that right? Any particular episode you ever look back on and
I'm trying to be like, I'm not trying, like I can't right now, but that has happened where you're proud of something, and then there's also ones you're like, I think that's probably more my view right now. Oh gosh, I wish I'm just like spacing, but
I'll tell you one, because it's kind of hard for you to say I did something good. I'm really proud of the Scientology episode.
Oh, yeah, Scientology episode. Yeah, that Scientology episode, that was cool.
I am.
Oh, Scientology.
Of Scientology. I mean, I think it's funny and I think it's smart, but I'm really proud of it because before that episode aired, no one spoke about Scientology. It was people were afraid to speak about it. People were intimidated, literally intimidated. People would show up at people's houses. They were very litigious, and we did it. And from that moment on, the floodgates opened, and people were able to talk about Scientology.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
And I'm really proud.
Yeah, I mean, I
of
think
that.
that's where, that we don't give a fuck attitude serves us not that great sometimes, but sometimes it's really good. And it does something. The other one, now that Anne said
I do remember an unpleasant conversation with Isaac Hayes that week. But
Yeah, there was a lot of unpleasant conversations, but
that was horrible.
Yeah.
Matt, we need you to pull the episode. What was it? So the last one that happened, this happened last year, where I came in with a head full of steam, and it was like it's like one of those, I love like how we get unreasonably mad about movies. Like that's like a little sub South Park thing. I don't know why. I'm not even really that much of a cinephile, but like movies, like I talk about, I'm like one of those cultural critics that would make way too much out of a movie. Like this means the end of the world, it's just a movie. So I kind of think that's funny. And so I came with a head full of steam, and I still believe this about, and it's not a conspiracy. It's like you see this thing happening where there's this kind of acquiescence to basically Chinese censors or the Chinese government kind of party line in Hollywood with big entertainment. And it isn't like, and I can go, screw that person or screw that person, but you can just see how it's happening. And it has this like something that was like, and you could read articles about it. I'm not saying anything incredibly novel, but like, I get unreasonably mad about movies, right? It's just dumb, right? So like, I don't think, we should do this thing about China. It was last year, it was pre-pandemic. And Trey and we came up with this whole thing where Randy went to China to sell weed, and we kind of did this thing. And then that just happened to be, it was just complete happenstance that then 2 days later, or when we were doing that, I can't remember, it was right on the heels of that. We did an episode, it aired on Wednesday, called Banned in China. And then, or like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but then that NBA dust up happened then.
Right.
And then we got to and then we got banned in China. But it was like, I know why this happened. Actually, I'll tell you why this happened. I got it. So you'll enjoy this, Doug. I was in some meeting with some Comedy Central people or something, and somebody says, like, we don't make enough money, international for South Park. The numbers are looking bad, or somebody said this, right? And somebody else in the meeting says, well, how are we doing in China? Well, China's huge. How much South Park is shown in China? And somebody else, and they, South Park is shown in China. I was like, well, it's kind of illegal or something like that in this meeting. And I was like, it's illegal. It was not illegal, but people know not to watch it. And I was like, really? And I was like, I just decided, well, if we're not seen there, like, let's just do this, so it wasn't like an incredible act of political bravery. It was more like, well, cool, we can just do whatever we want to say because it's not even seen there. So we did this thing, and it just coincided with the NBA thing. And then we got to give this quote. And it was just like, I think a really cool, like one of those moments when the critique in the show, and then it just magically,
you were once again in the zeitgeist, as you
so
often
once
find
again,
yourself.
and we're so old. I totally remember this. It was right around Trey's 50th birthday. And I swear to God, this happened. And it was our 300th episode. And we didn't have a party. We're like, we used to have parties every 20 episodes, like 80 episodes, big party, 100 episodes, now we don't have any parties because you can't have parties anymore in corporate culture. And we're all old and we don't want to like get drunk anymore. And then I just remember being like 300. It was just like, they gave it to us. Like, it was just the only thing that would make me and Trey happy at all. We're just so old. We're like, wow, we got banned in China. Wow, it was like a little present. It's like a little warm hug.
Speaking of movies,
I was like proud of that. Yeah, that was cool.
Speaking of movies that make you angry, I remember you're awfully angry at that last Indiana Jones movie.
oh my God.
Yeah,
I just say one thing. We start every season, just about every season, when we used to be in a writer's room together.
We just talk about movies.
Well, we would walk in and go, Matt, what's pissing you off? And Matt, without any irony, would be like, well, this movie, did you see? And then how dare the New York Times say this?
And it has to be this. And when a New York Times gives a shitty movie a good review, it makes me insane. I can't see.
And we talk about
it's the dumbest obsession. It's all I care about.
We talk about it for like the 12 weeks that we're in the office. Even after we've done a show about it, Matt is still upset about it.
J.J. Abrams getting a good review in the New York Times for that Star Wars basically pissed me off for 2 years, and that was it. That was
that was like the inspiration for 2 seasons of South Park.
Yeah, that's all they needed. Yeah.
Would somebody buy, if South Park didn't exist? I know this is like a little bit of a dumb question. Would somebody buy it today, or do you think people would look at it and go, "Oh, I can't do that right now"?
Oh,
I mean, you guys are here and have established yourself, as I like to say, South Park from almost day one flies with incredible air cover because, you know, people just immediately recognize it wasn't, you know, just about little kids swearing. It was really smart, really subversive, and just great. And you have flown with an enormous amount of air cover ever since, and get to do amazing things. But do you think somebody is still ready to do that?
I think so at some level. It's just so different. I mean, I do think we're grandfathered in a way, whether we should be or not. I don't know, you know, whether we should be or not. I think the kind of real anarchy and kind of mean anarchy, kind of crazy, chaotic stuff that we do is less in vogue. It's not just us, but like that was really like burn it down. It doesn't matter what it is, just burn it down. Like that's kind of what comedy was, and I feel like it's changed. I don't feel like I'm not making a judgment. I do feel like there's like eras of comedy. But that's why I like what we do now. It's different than what we did then. You know, we take all that, and that's what I'm saying is like I don't find that kind of whining about the times is very productive. But frankly, yeah, could South Park, would a big streaming service pay as much as, you know, we get paid to do what we're doing by a couple of white guys doing this kind of stuff? Man, you know, maybe not, but somebody would. There's some, you know, some crazy people that would. So I think it would. I think it's just more, it's just really different now, that kind of stuff. I mean, this is not like a controversial subject. I mean, you've had like, you know, there was a guy that ran the guy, commissioning officer of the BBC a couple of years ago said, you know, we wouldn't buy Monty Python today. You know, I don't think he was saying screw Monty Python. It was like 6, you know what I mean? Cambridge and Oxford educated white guys. Like, I'm not that interested in, if that walked in my office today, I wouldn't be that interested.
Right.
I get what he's saying. On the other hand, I think it was like totally offensive because like Monty Python is everything, you know? So like I get, so I think on some level it could, but at the time, it's really hard to contextualize between then and now. It really is so different.
It's honestly not a fair question, but
yeah, we would absolutely be somebody. I don't think we would like, oh, no one would hire us. I don't think we'd be like that, but I definitely think like we're grandfathered in a little bit on some stuff.
Just switching gears a little bit. So, you know, I don't know. So Book of Mormon is now how old?
10 years old.
10 years, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how long did that sort of gestate to, you know, was that something that was, you know, sort of always in the back of Trey's mind or your mind, or was it, you know, one day you sort of looked at each other like time to do a musical? Like, how did that sort of?
So we talked about a musical about Joseph Smith, kind of off and on, just as a kind of joke about Joseph Smith and the Mormons, because we're from Colorado, and that story of the Mormon pioneers, we kind of both knew it, and it's next door to Utah. And this is a true story. We saw Avenue Q that Bobby Lopez did, and both Trey and I really liked it. And Bobby's, you know, 10 years younger than, or 7 years younger than me and Trey or whatever. There was a little bit of one of those things about, he looked up to us, and I went out to breakfast with him, and he asked what he should do with, you know, he asked for some career advice, which seems so funny. And I just said, okay, well, what do you say to somebody when they say that? And he go, what do you want to do? And he said, I think like a musical about Joseph Smith, you know? And kind of like in that moment, almost legally, I had to say, we should do this together because we've had that idea, and I don't want you to think I ripped it off. I swear to God, we had that same idea. And so we started having meetings. It was like that. It was like, when someone else says that specific of an idea to you, you just, and it was, that sounds like I'm making up, but that's about how it happened. Wow. So we started working with Bobby, who's incredibly talented. And
Anne got to fulfill her dream of becoming
and she got a rom-com out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we were doing that, a lot of people were like, what are you guys doing? We're like, we're doing a musical about Mormons. And it's like, why are you doing that? Like, that's such a dumb thing to do. You know, so that's kind of like, sometimes people write about it, sometimes they're not, but like, it's always kind of dumb when we start doing it.
And Anne, tell us about, you know, what you're hearing about Broadway and theater and live theater, and, you know, what the future is, and when we might actually expect to be able to go see Book of Mormon again.
Yeah, people are, just in terms of Broadway, people are they're going to start to announce dates of opening in September, in the fall. We're not so sure we're going to be first out of the gate, but people are hopeful. You know, they're going to try, and we'll see what happens in the world of a pandemic if we can really do it.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing going on that we talk about, where there's a big institutional push to get Broadway going. There's a big from the governor, there's a big push. From the mayor, there's a push. There's plans to subsidize, because it'll need some kind of subsidy. If you walk around New York, it certainly doesn't feel like Broadway's going to be pumping. Like, I don't feel that way, you know. But on the other hand, you got to start somewhere. And you got and the people we work with, like, they've been sitting home for a year and a half. It's hard. The COVID part of it is in Broadway, big, and that's pretty much the last thing to come back. It really is, I think, the hardest hit. It's just hard to feel like, with the money that comes into Broadway in particular, like, that supports those salaries at that level, night after night, 8,000 tickets a week, like Book of Mormon or Wicked or the big shows. It's hard to, I feel like it's hard to see that in New York, like, in the next, it'll come back, you know, but it's going to be.
It's a question of when, but and the optimum way to see it is in a absolute packed theater. And these places aren't very big, and you want to be sitting shoulder to shoulder next to that person. You can kind of feel them laughing while you're laughing, and you know, it's going to be very difficult.
We can't risk. We don't want to risk people's health, and we don't want to risk the actors. And you're right, like, and we don't want to have 6 feet between each person in the theater. It's an unsolvable problem.
It really is. And there's a lot of different stakeholders, and there's a lot there, you know, there's theaters who need their rent and they want you to go. They want you to, you know what I mean? There's business owners, there's actors that want to go back to work. It feels like a mess.
When the pandemic arrived, you had 3 companies, right?
We had 5 companies.
5, yeah.
Holy cow. So where were so New York, there was a touring US company, right?
Yep. We had the West End. Australia,
End.
And we had a touring company in the UK.
Holy cow!
Yeah, it was brutal shutting those companies down. All
those people are out of work.
Yeah,
they've been all out of work the whole time. Yeah, and so part of it is, like, everyone wants to go back to work, and you feel that, but you just don't know, are the tickets going to be there to support it? So, it's a conundrum. It stinks.
You guys, South Park is available on HBO Max. Right. And you know, where you know, everybody is you know, spending most of their time watching, you know, TV content on streamers these days. So you know, what do you make of, like, you know, the streamers, and how is doing business with them any different than doing business, you know, as you did it, you know, Comedy Central in the heyday of basic cable? Or does it feel different? Is it different? Do you look at it differently? And do you have a favorite streamer? And you can't say HBO Max.
Yeah, I'd be interested in what you have to say about all that, Doug. But I find it's completely confounding. I have no idea why certain things are worth a lot of money to a streamer and why certain things aren't. It seems completely decoupled from the value proposition of all business. I you know, if you can figure it out, and Doug, you probably, I've like talked to you about, but like, we have Book of Mormon makes total sense. Here's your ticket. Money comes in, the money gets in theater. It's highly boutique, kind of like unionized thing. And it's so amazing. People pay money, the money goes to the people. Like, you can understand, everyone can understand that.
They've been doing it that way forever.
Okay. So then we have, like, basic cable, you sell some ads, you get subscribers, there's the fee that come from the carriage fees. Like, I can understand that. Okay. Then we make the show, Doug pays us, he gets his money, you know, whatever. There's a thing there, you know. And then you have streamers. I have no idea. And then they don't tell you, you don't know what's popular, who knows what's popular, you know what I mean? And
so do they talk to you, like, guys, about how South Park is performing for them? Or
they do, and there's certain, like, you get contractual data, like, in the contract when you sign it, you have to give us this data. We, you know, some kind of, I don't know how that gets figured out. But when you get to the artist level, I just think it's completely decoupled from reality. I think there's whole series of dozens of episodes of Netflix shows that people go out and shoot, and they leave their families and they go on location. They shoot a professionally made some dumb show about something, and literally nobody watches it. That's my contention. Nobody, like less than 1,000 people. Like I think it's that bad. You know what I mean? And there's no way to even check what is being watched and what it's not, you know? So in some ways it works out great because there's a lot of content. There's a lot of great stuff being made. But I'm as you can tell, I'm pretty cranky. I get unreasonably mad about things. And like, I think that overall the economic structure of streaming with massive amounts of exceptions, but a general trend is towards shittier content and blander shit, like a lot of bland shit. And that kind of like they're not telling us what's actually working or not. And so like you don't have when
Well, it's certainly hard
this
to.
thing's a hit on Netflix. This thing's a hit.
Well,
on
I say it's hard
believe
to what it's
Why do you
hard to
believe
see
what
what a
they're
hit
saying?
is anymore.
Yeah.
Just
Right?
because Netflix says
Nobody
it,
knows
press
what a hit
department-
show is.
Yeah, the press department decides they're going to push the show. It's a hit because that's the one that makes Netflix, and it probably is reasonably popular or something, but it also matches some kind of corporate strategy. And it's like, that's fine. It's like, but it's like, that's kind of thing that kind of is fine. Kind of what is a hit and what people are listening to. Like, I don't know. It's not like I want to go back to the charts or like, you know what I mean? Overnight ratings, but there is some like honesty about that a little bit. You know what I mean? And I think this is a big game right now.
It's a world of personalization where my biggest hit is not your biggest hit or Anne's biggest hit. Everybody's got, everybody has their own experience.
Yeah, but I don't think like the way that Netflix presents what is popular and what isn't on their network is actually reflects the numbers, right? There's not that there can't, you ran a network, you didn't do that. That's not exactly true on a network either. But I can't figure out that business at all. At all. I can't. No idea. No idea.
I'm going to ask you guys what everybody always asks everybody on any Zoom you're ever on, which is, what's your last favorite show you watched on stream?
Oh, geez. See, I'm so shit. I don't watch it.
I'll tell you, it was not Bridgerton.
It wasn't Bridgerton. You didn't like it?
No.
I watched Uncut Gems and I loved it. But that's a real movie.
Oh, movie.
Real movie.
Yeah, I didn't watch it till like.
Oh, let's talk about that for a second. What do you think
That's
happens?
a
What do you
great
think
movie.
happens to the movie business?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. I'm totally, and of course, I feel aggrieved that it's sort of like people like us that are like left out of this, whatever, this like new business model. But I have no idea.
But but you and Trey, and you're planning to make movies going forward. Do you envision them on big screens in theaters? Do you envision them, on a Netflix or an HBO Max? Do you care? Or
I do care.
Is it not really about where it is, but what you make?
No way. Like no way. Like I definitely we have projects that we could consider like, hey, that'd be a cool streaming project. I mean, a South Park special is sort of a streaming. It's on streaming. If it was not every movie, the couple of the movie projects we're working on, they have to be shown in the theater and they have to be premiered there because they have to be seen in a collective experience. It is the best way to see it. And even if, and I understand that's it's not an old fashioned attitude. It's the way that you can make cultural, it's a way that you can, what I'm saying is like, it's a way you can't lie, right? People are going to show up to the theater. And that's one of the ways that theater, even right now, and it's the greater place, is a much more honest thing than streaming. I really, really don't believe anything I hear about what's a hit on streaming at all. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, almost conspiratorial. Like, I just don't believe it at all. But if you show a thing and there's a bunch of people who go to that theater and they have that experience, you're going to hear about it. And that's what I know I sound like some really old guy, but I just don't believe the streamers at all right now. I don't think that's, and I would hate to do like, I mean, you see these, Netflix has a $70 million movie on every week. And then you hear about it, it's gone 3 days.
Right.
Like, screw that. Like, that sounds terrible. Like I don't know. And I'm not talking about money. I'm just talking about like, that just sounds terrible.
Right.
There's just like a terrible fate for something that you care about. And I don't really, when they say, well, it's available in 200 million homes and like 65 million people watch 10 seconds of it. It's like, I don't give a shit. I couldn't care about it at all, man. I mean, I think it's an amazing technology and it's an amazing thing, but the business part of it, I think is really, really, really decoupled right now. Is that what you want to hear, Doug? Doug, do you disagree?
No, I just want to hear what you have to say.
That's the real bones, man. I'll give you the real news.
I know you will. So I'm gonna ask a couple quick questions. Then we're just gonna try and get to a couple of these questions I got from the students. Anne, what would you tell Anne Garefino today if she was graduating Boston College? What do you know now that you didn't know then? What kind of advice would you give yourself getting ready to jump into this business?
I think I would say get on the path sooner if you can. I took a little circuitous route and I don't regret it. It was great. But I realized by the time I got to LA, the years of networking that I could have had, I lost. You know, I didn't really get to LA until I was probably 30. And all those people that you could PA with or volunteer with or all that stuff that all start rising as your career changes, you need those people to figure out, like, you know, Matt and Trey came out of college, and, you know, they have had that experience for like a good 10 years before I did. So I would say get on the path sooner.
Did you have a mentor or a hero or somebody you looked up to, or somebody you were like, I want to be that person?
You know, I would like to meet her someday. I'd like to meet Kathleen Kennedy, because she's Kathleen Kennedy. You know,
She's
I always
Kathleen
kind of
Kennedy, yeah.
respected what
I
she
like to
did.
meet Kathleen Kennedy.
Huh?
I bet she'd
I'd
like to meet
too,
you, Anne.
Maybe.
I would.
But, you know, she was there. She was kind of in the boys club. She was making movies. I was like, that's a woman making movies. Look at those movies she's making.
Did it feel like a boys club to you coming into it?
I'm in a boys club now.
She's still in a boys club. It's me and Trey. What are you talking about? It's terrible. It's torture.
And what would you tell young Matt Stone?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Quit smoking earlier than I quit smoking. I don't know. You know, I think that when we catch up, Doug, I'll tell you. But I think the thing Ann and we've been through, you know, like lately, is and this is going to sound really cheesy, but I think I've done this right a lot and not right some. But when I think about the industry, and when we wanted to work in entertainment and comedy, you know, you moved to LA. So now that's not a thing, but that was an organizing principle. You moved to LA. And that's what Ann's talking about, is you're around these people, and you're an agent, and you're a, you know, TV executive, and I'm a comedy writer, and you just end up staying friends, and, you know, people, that's your contemporaries. And that it really is a marathon and not a sprint, and it's a long life. And that I'm proud of the relationships we had that come back around, like us. You know, as I said, I'm not every moment if I lived up to that, but recently I think Ann and I are realizing that, like, you know, if you're going to do it, you're going to be around, and the people we know have been around. It's like, it's cool. You know what I mean? And not everyone's got to be perfect the whole time, but you will see those people again that you sit across the table from, you know, and that's when, you know, it doesn't work out, that's, you're going to see that person again, you know? So, you know,
I always tell people,
cool.
If I knew you guys were going to be so successful and be around for 25 years, I would have been a lot nicer to you.
You're pretty nice. But that's what I'm saying, you know, that's, you don't know which one of those it is, you know, and it ends up being a lot of them, actually. So I think that's kind of what's in my current mood, I guess.
My favorite question comes from Aiden Leary, who's a student who wants to know, do you like fish sticks?
Yeah, I don't actually.
And go for a fish stick, Ann?
I grew up Catholic. Of course I like fish sticks.
And I have to say, this question came up a lot from a lot of different people who wanted basically ask the same question, which is, what do you do? And I was a little concerned because they're students, they're already experiencing this. What do you do to sort of get out of a writer's block funk, or just a funk in general, and keep yourself motivated to go in every day and be funny, or at least try to be funny? You know, is it, you know, do you have things you do to sort of keep yourself up and sharp and kind of work through, you know, everything else that's going on in your life when you kind of get into the room with your staff?
I don't know. I feel like with Trey and I, we just kind of revolve around each other, and sometimes one of us is going to be down, the other one luckily is kind of up, because we're different enough of people, you know. So that's where being in a partnership or a team like we are kind of helps, because somebody's always like, hey, what's going on, you know, like, you know, and then it'll sound like a little bit like, you know, a basketball player, but I feel like that sometimes the writer's room is an escape, not a burden, you know. You go, oh God, you know, okay, this is this fun place I gotta be. So
Yeah.
right, Ann?
And
okay.
You know,
You
the
and
other
I-
thing
What's
about
that?
saying that, Matt comes in having talked to friends the night before, which I think is really good for you. Like, you kind of continue the writer's room with your friends a lot of
Right.
time. And Trey comes in. I mean, the worst thing ever was when we did it was the last show of the season, and it was about, was it the hockey one or something, or a baseball one, or it was a sports one.
Right.
And Trey literally came in and laid on the floor for the whole meeting. He was like, I got nothing. It's the last show. and you know, one of the many times
signal.
he was like, call
You
the
guys
network,
got to do something. You
call
guys got to
Doug.
do something.
And we were just, and that's horrible. That's like terrifying for me. But I think the thing is that they just keep doing it. They just keep doing it. Like Trey was laying on the floor, Matt was still talking to him. You know, he was like, "What about this? What about this? What about this?" And you know, we've had writers coming in and out of the room over the years, but it is them, and I think you just keep doing it. You just don't. You can't give up. We have a show to do, and like
I was gonna say you never missed. I mean, I had to look it up, but I guess there was I had forgotten about this. I guess there was one episode because of it, right? Because
somebody hit a transformer and the power went down.
But we did get a question about one, Anne, and I know you all remember this. And the question from David Erdischek was, how much did Donald Trump getting elected change the episode that night?
Oh God, it was awful. Remember that?
I remember it.
You were there.
God, Doug was on the phone so fast. He was like, "Do I have an episode? Anne, do I have an episode?" And I'm like, "You were."
But the story was you had basically written the episode.
We were going to finish early that night.
That Hillary had won, right?
We were going to finish.
No one. I haven't even seen the footage, but you know, we had a documentary crew in the office that night, and we have the whole thing on tape of us just sitting there going, "Oh my God." Calling Doug and Doug being like, "Get the show done." We're like,
"Get the show done."
And Trey really stepped up, and we figured out.
Here's the thing: Matt and Trey were like, "We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it." And I'm telling you, I said this to them. I was like, "You can't be the rock stars that do the show at the last minute every week and not deliver the show."
We were like, "Yes, we can."
They were both in my office.
We were like, "Si se puede."
And you know what? Wait, kids, you know what that is? That's a producer doing their job.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Get in the writer's room." And we all went back to the writer's room. Now, of course, they were cursing me probably all the way down the hall, but I was just like, "It's 10 o'clock. We have time to fix this show." And they were pretty, I mean, the whole building it looked like
one of the worst
in the building.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Donald Trump too, but it was one of the worst, but not even Donald Trump aside, it was one of the worst nights of my life. I didn't
you hate Donald Trump, but you hate working till 6 in the morning even more.
Oh yeah. That was the worst part of it. It wasn't.
And any chance that we could call and say we can't do it, you know, they were all over that. And I was like,
I get chills thinking about that. That was awful.
That was a long night. Well, look, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and certainly I do. I love you guys for doing this. That's unfortunately all the time we have. I promised Anne and Matt that we'd get them out of here in an hour. And before we go, I'd like to thank Marty Cook and the Center for Comedic Arts at Emerson, and of course Emerson Los Angeles for co-producing the show. As the school year comes to a close, we're going to take a brief hiatus. Hopefully we're going to be back in the fall, hopefully in person at ELA with more all joking aside sessions. So like I said, I appreciate everybody come tonight, especially Matt and Anne, and everybody stay well and be well. And I will see you guys soon, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Doug.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Doug. And thank you, everybody. Hope it was fun. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.
Bye.